This is Caribbean News Desk. I'm Dennis Chabrol. First, the headlines. Haiti's Prime Minister resigns. Dominica's opposition leader finally gets audience with Chief Elections Officer to raise concerns. A union in Trinidad and Tobago says it was ignored in talks about likely telecoms monopoly due to the merger of Cable and Wirless and Columbus Communications. Antigua and Barbuda warns LIAT pilots against industrial action. Details coming up.
We are one Caribbean, one people, one nation, facing the same destiny. Two separated we are, as one let's come together. One market economy, Caribbean is how it should be. Let's support CARICOM for Caribbean unity. It takes you, it takes me.
And now the details. Haiti's ex-Haitian Prime Minister Laurent Lamothe has thanked those who supported him during the country's recent political unrest, which led to his stepping down at the recommendation of a special committee. Lamothe delivered a speech on Sunday in which he thanked his ministers, government workers and Haitian citizens for the 31 months of his term. He announced his resignation on his Twitter account Sunday, 2 days after President Michel Martelly agreed with the Presidential Advisory Committee's report recommending that a resignation be done to overcome the country's political crisis. The former Prime Minister credited his administration with reducing poverty from 31% to 24%, but at the same time he acknowledged that that was not sufficient. The Advisory Committee also asked for the resignation of Supreme Council of Judicial Power President Anel Alexis Joseph and the judges of the Provisional Electoral Council. The panel also requested the release of political prisoners and asked Haitian senators to approve amendments in electoral law to facilitate the holding of elections in the country. Elections were to be held in October but were postponed with no specific dates, as the electoral law is needed to help the process to hold the elections, and it was blocked in the Senate. 2 weeks of protests in the capital and other cities denounced alleged corruption and demanded the resignation of President Michel Martelly and Lamothe. More on this report.
Haiti's Prime Minister Laurent Lamothe succumbed to domestic and international pressure on Sunday and announced he would resign in a televised address in the middle of the night. Laurent said, "I am leaving the post of Prime Minister this evening with a feeling of accomplishment." The announcement came a day after President Michel Martelly accepted the recommendations of a special commission that called for Lamotte's resignation as part of an effort to resolve a long-running political dispute over long overdue legislative and municipal elections. On Saturday, thousands of demonstrators took to the streets in several cities, and one man was shot dead by police near the ruins of the presidential palace.
Dominica's opposition United Workers' Party, or UWP, led by opposition leader Lex Linton, is promised again, protested outside the country's Chief Elections Officer's office, Stephen Larocque, and the Electoral Commission in the presence of tight police security. Preliminarily, the Elections Commission had announced that the UWP had clinched 6 seats in the December 8th election, but lost one of them to the Dominican Labour Party during a recount when a number of ballots were deemed spoiled. Linton and a small group of his team were able to meet with the Chief Elections Officer, who said he gave certain undertakings in regards to the alleged irregularities in the now disputed Grand Fond seat, which is heading to court.
He indicated they've already begun an investigation into the count of votes in the Grand Fond constituency. He thinks that should be completed within 2 weeks, and then we will take it from there. They have asked for certain reports. They'll be talking to different agents. Mr. Fontaine, as the candidate, has been asked in this morning's meeting to submit a report on what happened, and of course the investigators will be talking to agents and talking to other people in an attempt to determine what really went on in terms of the irregularities we allege took place by as a result of the actions of the returning officer and the elections officer in the Mon Dec Rivière Grand Fond constituency.
The opposition leader said he also raised concerns about alleged bribery by the ruling Dominica Labour Party through the provision of airfares for persons to return home to vote, as well as the holding of musical concerts during the election campaign season. Meanwhile, former Dominica Prime Minister and UWP leader Edison James has urged party supporters to brace themselves for a hard and long battle with the government over the alleged irregularities in the Grand Fond constituency.
Very often I suspect we will be at the commission. We will be. They run to hide today. You walk away. They run and hide today. But I understand that we will be there. I expect you to be there as well. Do not get tired. Remember my words. Do not get tired. Do not get weary. It is a long battle. It is a long road. But we will be there.
Meantime, Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has announced a 17-member cabinet, giving all of those who were victorious at the polls a ministerial portfolio. He also announced that the government's choice for a speaker will again be Alex Boyd Knights. She has held that post for 14 years and has been regarded by the opposition as biased. Thousands of Venezuelans mobilized on Monday in Caracas to protest what they termed the imperialist actions of the United States after the U.S. Congress approved the sanctions against Venezuelan officials last week. The government-sponsored demonstration in March, which wended its way through several avenues in the western part of the capital, was called by President Nicolas Maduro on the 15th anniversary of the approval in a referendum of the country's constitution, a day declared by him to be the day of constitutional popular power. The U.S. Congress last Wednesday gave the green light to a bill that, when it enters into force, will freeze the financial assets and prohibit the issuance of visas to Venezuelan government officials linked, according to Washington, to the episodes of violence in the country experienced during the demonstrations early this year. The possible sanctions provoked an immediate reaction from Maduro, who said they were a means of threatening his government. On previous occasions, Maduro, who has denounced Washington's alleged interference in Venezuela, said that if the government of Barack Obama imposed the sanctions in the country, he would respond firmly and that he would not allow the country to be intimidated. The tense relations that have prevailed for years between Caracas and Washington are currently at a low point, with no ambassadors stationed in either of the two nations and continuous conflicts and denunciations by the Venezuelan government over the alleged illicit activities of U.S. embassy officials. The Trinidad and Tobago Communications Workers Unions, or CW, condemns the move by the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, or CTU, for excluding them from a critical meeting which was held last week with Cable and Wirless and Digicel. The two-day forum was held at Cascadia Hotel in Port of Spain to discuss Cable and Wireless' position on trying to seek majority control of state-owned telecommunications service of Trinidad and Tobago, TSTT. However, the recognized union CW for TSTT was not invited to the meeting, nor was the media. Our Trinidad correspondent tells us more in this report.
Trinidad Communications Workers Union Secretary General Joseph Remy says the approach taken by Caribbean Telecommunications to exclude them from a historical meeting is a blatant insult to the workers of the telecommunications sector in the region and, by extension, the citizens of the Caribbean. Mr. Remy criticized the bullying tactics adopted by Cable and Wireless and Columbus for promising 500 new jobs to be created if the deal is approved.
Once again, they are attempting to seduce the Caribbean regulators into their prostitution ring by making offers that some insular regional leaders would gladly succumb to. The Communication Workers Union dismisses these obscene acts and calls on the regional regulators to speak out against this type of immoral business strategy.
Mr. Remy urged the Caribbean Telecommunications Union to disclose all the information that was presented by the representative stakeholders and providers since Digicel broke the said Chatham rules and posted their presentation done by their CEO, Dennis O'Brien, for public consumption. Just last week, O'Brien stated in his presentation that if this merger takes place, you will eliminate a very vibrant competitor in Columbus, and Cable and Wireless will basically own the market in TNT, Jamaica, Barbados, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Grenada. I am Andrea Perez reporting from Port of Spain, Trinidad for Caribbean News Desk.
Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown has told the union representing LIAT pilots that any industrial action at this time would be unacceptable. Brown met officials from LIAT, that's the Leeward Islands Pilots Association, over the weekend in the face of possible industrial action. The union is dissatisfied with LIAT's decision to fire 2 pilots for taking out an aircraft during Tropical Storm Gonzalo in October. An ATR aircraft was damaged in the process, but LIAT claims the flight was authorized. Prime Minister Brown, who has been trying to avert industrial action, warned pilots against downing tools.
For any particular stakeholder group, be it the pilots or the management for that matter, or the directors, take any hardcore, inflexible position that will result in any form of industrial action, especially at this time of the year, will be totally unacceptable. And as I've said to my colleague prime ministers and to the other stakeholders, and to the pilots in particular, there is no way, under any circumstances, there should be any industrial action taken, certainly not during this period.
Brown says he has told LIAT's management and the pilots that it is their duty to ensure the airline remains viable.
Both the members of LIAT as well as the management of LIAT have actually indicated a willingness to work with each other, not to be rigid in their positions, because that type of inflexibility does not augur well to resolving issues. And as I explained to them, we all have an obligation to keep LIAT viable. I mean, the obligation does not lie exclusively with the various heads. All stakeholders of LIAT have an obligation to make sure that LIAT remains a viable institution, not necessarily in terms of profitability, but that they're in a position to continue to operate.
Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown. The Antigua and Barbuda government has been trying to broker a deal between LIAT and pilots, but so far their efforts have not led to the reinstatement of the 2 pilots. LIAT says industrial action remains an option. Caribbean member states of the United Nations believe that education can play a major role in countering oppression and cultivating peace. The region's position was made known at the United Nations General Assembly. The position of the 14 independent Caribbean member states of the UN comes against the background of several of them, like Guyana, Suriname, and the Trinidad and Tobago, being multiracial and multicultural. A number of other countries are also increasingly becoming multicultural due to migration. They include Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, and St. Kitts and Nevis. The United Nations Radio, Stephanie Kutrix, has more.
Education is a powerful weapon against oppression and can support a culture of peace, according to the permanent representative to the UN of St. Kitts and Nevis. Inga King was addressing the UN General Assembly on behalf of the 14 member states of the Caribbean community, CARICOM. Ambassadors on Monday shared how their countries or regions are promoting interreligious and intercultural dialogue, understanding, and cooperation for peace. Ms. King said CARICOM itself is the essence of cultural diversity and recognizes the importance of promoting these values.
CARICOM strongly believes that education, which causes a fundamental shift in how we view reality, is a powerful weapon against oppression. Education empowers. It is CARICOM's hope that through peace education, we can create a mindset of tolerance and cooperation, an enduring culture of peace.
Ms. King added that the UN has to be a force for equality and fairness in the context of an inequitable system of globalization, working to ensure that rules apply evenly, effectively, and consistently. Stephanie Kutrix, United Nations.
And that's it for this edition of Caribbean News Desk. Don't forget you can visit our website at caribnewsdesk.com. We are also on Facebook at facebook.com/caribnewsdesk. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/demwaves. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dennis Chabrol.